But yeah, thanks all for joining the Community Experiences web meetup for Wired Tech Test. It's basically just to cover a few different topics around the tech test, because so many different businesses are doing it in completely different ways. I think from speaking to all four of you, you all do them in different ways and or haven't even done them before. So it'd be interesting to get an insight to how you do them, why you make those sort of decisions, and hopefully make it, I guess, more of a learning platform for everyone else when we share it afterwards. The reason I wanted to do this was there's a lot of candidates that we're losing out to processes and how long tech tests are taking. They're trying to perfect them, making them too, I guess, difficult, and they don't really know what they're meant to be doing in terms of the content they're looking for and what the hiring managers are looking for as well. So just thought it would be a good idea to get some of us together within the tech community and learn some more about it. So I'm Josh, I'm from Xperiences. I'm a software development consultant, have been for the last 5-6 years. So if you want to, I guess, go around and we'll introduce yourselves, where you're working. I guess we'll start with you, Toby.
Yeah, I'm Toby. I'm at Infinity Works. We're a tech transformation consultancy. I've been here for about 18 months now. Was a recruitment agent before. Joined internally, lead the drive for recruitment across the north mainly. Although we have been doing stuff across all 4 offices more recently. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And Erin?
I'm an internal talent acquisition manager at Sopost. We're a software as a service company. We provide a software that helps sampling marketing campaigns. I have worked here for 6 months, 4 months now. And before that, I was in recruitment for 5 years and with a focus on creative and digital recruitment.
And Mark?
Right, my name is Mark Wilding. I'm the Technical Director at McCann Health Medical Communications. I've only been here a month, so a lot of what I'll be talking about is what I've done historically in my career. I've been in software development for over 35 years, usually in technical management roles and also technical roles. So yeah, I've been involved with recruiting developers for many years.
Amazing. And finally, Paul.
Yeah, I'm Paul Laws. I'm a squad leader and digital in Manchester. Been there about 7 or 8 weeks now. Been in IT for 30-ish years, worked for various consultancies, software houses, end users, managed teams for 20 plus years, and been involved in recruitment in one way or another for about 25 years, including setting up a whole recruitment process for one of my recent companies. So yeah, love it. Love recruiting techies, but probably not quite the way that these guys do it.
Amazing. So yeah, just interesting to get an understanding from each of you how your businesses, if they do use technical tasks, and how you go about onboarding of the developers, particularly. I guess we'll start with you, Paul, as you were finishing up just then.
Yeah, so not entirely sure the full detail how we do it at hand. I mean, only just joined and not been through a technical interview myself, but we don't use automated tech tests. We tend to use kind of conversational approaches, give people problems to solve. From a personal perspective, my preferred approach is very much around getting to know the person and not necessarily their specific language skills. I'm not qualified to assess that, but how they actually go about looking at a problem and solving the problem. If I'm looking at I guess anybody with more than about 12 months experience, if they tell me they can write in a specific language, their CV and their LinkedIn profile will tell me if they've got the background to do that.
Okay, cool. And Mark?
Right, well, I've used many methods over the years. Obviously, I'm not aware how McCann do things just yet because I'm fairly new there myself. But yeah, historically, we've had many ones. Usually, we will have a personality interview. Obviously, I think that's really important, as Paul just said, to actually get to know the person. Because when you're actually creating a team, it's not just about their technical knowledge. It's how well they're going to gel with other team members, and how, is there a missing part of your team that missing personality trait maybe that you're actually looking for in your team. So, a lot of that's kind of like also there. But obviously, we've always had technical questions. We usually, specifically for a role, we'll have a set of technical questions which we will run through question by question and make sure that they have actually got the technical knowledge that they state they have. But we will also usually request, and this is a big plus if people actually have it, is actually a link to a GitHub account where we can actually look through software that they've written themselves. Usually we'll get the senior devs to actually take a look at the quality of their code, how well structured it is, etc., etc. And then more recently, we have actually had simple technical tasks that we would set someone, which would quite simply be create a login system. And it's quite literally, we have a look at how well they actually generate a login system, how they approach it, what sort of technologies they'll use to do it, all this sort of stuff. So, but it's a real, in theory, should be a fairly simple technical task for them to do. But to be honest, I personally would put more store on their GitHub account, or the fact that they actually do personal projects themselves, which shows they have a love for programming outside the job of programming, which really, really adds, in my opinion, to someone's sort of love of programming. If you love programming, you just tend to sort of really be a mindset that I would share, shall we say?
So if you love programming, you're into Mark's team. You're doing the outside projects.
I'm definitely, my love is definitely programming. I do precious little of it these days.
Avoid it as much as you can.
Just realised I was called Katie Scales. My partner been using my laptop to do Zoom calls with her work bunch. I've just realised I've had to switch it around. Yeah.
I did see that when it was entered. I wasn't sure whether it was either Mark's partner or whether it was your girlfriend, to be honest. Toby, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, cool. So mirroring what Paul said, really, about the pair programming approach, we do a approach of getting to know the person through solving a solution or approaching a solution together. How do you approach a problem? What are the steps you take? What's the thought process around it? How do you communicate with the person next year? We operate in a massive pair programming environment, a mob programming environment, and that's how we work with our customers. So we always look to bring that into the interview process by doing the pair programming session. Obviously, in the physical world, it was easy to get a room together and fire up a laptop and start solving some problems together. Over the virtual world, we do it over Google Hangouts. It's more of a guided coding session. We give the person a problem. They then fire up that problem and communicate with the person on the steps they take when it comes to sort of test-driven development, how they read the documentation, how they're looking for caching, and they're checking for bugs. All these sort of problems all the way along the line is how we approach our sort of pair programming. And then we follow it up with a virtual whiteboarding session. So we fire up a whiteboard and then we do two consultants and the person interviewing in the session, talking about architecture, talking about things like how does the internet work. We're talking about all sorts of different questions out there that are relevant to exploring a person's mindset of how they understand certain ways of working in the world of tech.
Amazing, thank you. And Erin, finally.
Yeah, so we have quite a thorough process at Post. Obviously, our whole business is technology, so it's really important, imperative that these people can do what they say they can do on their CV. So I do an initial screening call that is personality based, which is kind of what you guys mentioned there. We also look at their GitHub, and we then put a live coding test together. We have there's about 4 guys have implemented different tests, all of which are kind of accessible online. You can probably see them. So you always do your research when you are approaching tech tests. But these are pretty simple tasks that we ask someone to code live. We ask them to talk through their process and how they're approaching problems. And it just gives us an insight into how they work. There's usually about 3 or 4 people on the call, so it is quite intimidating, but that pressure that they've they feel is interesting to see how they react to the issues. Once that's done, we give them a take-home task that they do over the course of 3 hours. We include a tutorial in that. We use it's quite a new language that we use. So this gives them the insight in working with the language, see if they enjoy it. And then if they do and want to pursue the role, then we kind of do another personality. There's quite a few hurdles to jump through, but yeah.
Amazing, thank you. So yeah, I guess this is just a question to whoever wants to jump out first. But I mean, what have you found the difficulties with like the typical way that you process? Mainly aimed at Erin and Toby here, but Mark and Paul, if you've got something to add for, I guess, previous experiences. But what's the difficulty that you have when a technical part of the process is added?
Should I go, Erin? Or
No, go on.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been on both sides of the fence, and when I was on agency side, I used to work with companies who sent out tech tests. Sometimes they'd be quite intensive tech tests for people to do at home. The difficulties are, I suppose, it's a competitive market out there. It's often when you get someone who is of a high bar, they will have 4 or 5 other companies after them, and if you give them a tech test that's going to take 6 hours or 4 to 6 hours, whatever it may be, to crack on with, they're probably going to go for the one that's not got the tech test. However, when I came into Infinity Works, I worked in Infinity Works before joining. Their pair programming sessions that they do, real sort of you get to do the technical side of things, but you also get to know the person along the way. So it's part of the interview, and it gives the person, it's a two-sided, but interviews are two-sided. So, you know, it gives the person the experience of working with our consultants, as they would be doing on their day-to-day role, and solving the problem together. So I think the pair programming session definitely is something that it's a staple within our interviews. It has to happen for an engineer. But yeah, I think send home tech tests, I'm up in the air with it really. It's been difficult in the past. It's worked in the past. So yeah, I can see why it does cause challenges, but also you do get people who run it head first and absolutely smash it out of the park. So, and you can tell that person's passionate about not just their career, but also about your business, about the business they're looking to join, because they put 110% in it. And that's a big standpoint on its own. If someone's got away and you can see all the stuff they've done to get this test together and send it back over to you in a really polished state, then you know you've got someone who's really committed to your business from the offset before you even hire the person.
Amazing, yeah. Because what I found recently is more a case of like people juggling multiple. So like, especially when there's a lot more jobs out there and less candidates. One guy I was speaking to sort of had 6, 7, 8 on the go at one time. So in a situation where he's juggling 10, still working or even still available, life does get in the way. So it's just trying to work out a way of how to give the best over when you've got 7, 8 hour potential tests. So it's like how to, I guess, deliver those at the best of your capability when you've got so many, and picking out what is best. And if you like all of the roles that you've got, and you put in all that time into potentially not necessarily get some feedback, it's how to manage those really.
I suppose it comes down to how the company showcases themselves in the initial phone call, or the initial the brand awareness they've got out there, or how they engage with the person from the first touch points. There's always competition out there for people hiring the same people. That's just the way it is. It's the way the tech scene is, and it's got to be for a long time. I think how you market your business and your brand and how you appeal to certain people is leveraged on that point. That's how you get people to really commit to wanting to do those tech tests, or wanting to interview, and wanting to put 110% in. So those first steps are the really important ones. They're definitely where you'll get people committed to putting all their effort into the tech test, and then the interview thereafter, and they'll be sat on the edge of the seat waiting for the phone call back to see what the decision is. It's those initial engagements, those initial phone calls, talking about values, culture, community, what as a business we can provide them as a place of work, and where they can go within our business, and that's really important. The journey is a super integral part to be able to highlight where they can go, but also let them be the sort of captain of their own ship.
Yeah, I agree. We've just gone through quite a successful round of hiring, and when I explained those few hurdles, like a lot of people initially thought, "Oh my God, there's loads to do there," but once we get people in front of the right and they ask the right questions to have those exciting conversations about the tech that they can learn, in this particular business, I've obviously seen tech tests in previous businesses as well, and they aren't as excited about a random tech test that's created by a third party or like through a recruiter. It's difficult, but with the ones that I've approached, they've seen that there's an opportunity there to learn a brand new software or like language, and we give them tutorials so they understand that they don't have to fully know it first of all before the test. It's a learning process, and that's something that they can add to the CV at the end of it, whether they get the job or not.
I think what you said, that's really important. That candidate journey is really important, and long-lasting impression. It's something that every business should try and leave. You know, if someone's not right now, then that's not going to be right in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months time. So giving someone that experience to, if it wasn't quite right at the time, but they can go away and constructive feedback, something to take away and work upon, and regular contact and regular touch points thereafter is definitely the journey. I suppose most candidates, I mean, probably agree with me here, but you know, how have you found it yourselves in the businesses that you've worked in or you've joined?
I worked for an organisation that did it entirely the opposite way around, and literally the first thing they did with any tech, I wasn't going into tech, so it didn't happen to me, but they put them basically through a set of technical tests, and it resulted in two things. It did disenfranchise people because they were just like, you just throw me straight into a tech test. And in all honesty, we didn't have much of a clue as to what level that person was. So sometimes it was just way too hard for the level that person were at. And then you go the other extreme where you're actually insulting somebody's capability. You've got somebody with 15, 20 years development experience and giving them something that, is more aimed at a grad or a junior developer. But the other thing as well then is if somebody does really, really well in that technical test, as the recruiter, you then come under pressure from the other people in the process saying, yeah, but he's a really good developer. And you're like, yeah, but he's not going to fit in the team. Yeah, but he's a brilliant developer. and you end up hiring somebody who unfortunately is the wrong person, and for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. Subsequent to that, I've always fought to get the person, and if we've got a person that we can fit in the team, where are they going to sit level wise? Let's find the right person and then decide, have they got a level of technical skills that we can work with?
Yeah.
And does that have there been, I guess, negatives to that or have you had like reasonably good experience from like hiring off the person? Is it often quite trainable?
Where we really did that, we did really well with it, because there was me and another guy that were basically tasked with doing a bunch of recruitment. I think we brought in about 20 people in technical areas that neither of us had any real strong sets, and neither of us have ever done any real hands-on development. And we picked out the people. Basically, these people are going to fit in the organisation. We know we're going to be able to work with them, and then worked out where they'd sit in terms of seniority. And we put together a development team really well. So it came out as a fantastic development team. Did a product in 3 months from not having a team. So no, it's an approach that's worked really well for me. And I know and do cultural and technical interviews, and you will only get the job if you pass the cultural interview, and the technical interview is more about leveling.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've always had the last part would be the technical test. I mean, we start off with a personality test, then we would move into the technical questions, usually as part of the same interview, just so as it's, you're not sort of getting people to do about 2 or 3 interviews and try and do it all in one go. And then, toward the end, if we think this person is right for the company, then we will go on and request the technical test. Although there may be some that we've just decided, this person doesn't need a technical test. We can see, basically from their track record. I mean, historically, I'm going back a few years, but I used to work in the computer games business, and it was fairly straightforward then, because people would have a portfolio of products that actually worked on, and usually you would only be employing people who've already completed at least one or two computer games, and the reviews of those games, the quality of those games. It was quite a much easier way of doing things, to be honest. So much harder in business, because obviously you can't. A lot of software is actually written internally for companies, so you can never ever see that.
Sure. And so in that circumstance where you're doing you've done all the personality interviews, and then you pass on to the technical task, and the technical task that you really liked them as an individual, the tech task that they've done isn't necessarily up to scratch. What would you do in that situation?
Well, to be honest, I'd be kind of wondering why it wasn't up to scratch.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we would obviously, we do give them feedback. We would say, this is our feedback on your test. If they have a reasonably good reason why that's the case. I mean, if the case was I didn't have time to do it, then I would, to be honest, say, well, how much do you actually want this job?
Yeah, for sure.
I know it can be a programmer's market out there at the moment, but still, you have to have. I believe you need people who want to work for your company, and I do think that's a very important factor.
Sure. And is it something that you could train? Sorry, is it something that, if it was like a little thing that you reckon you could train, would you still be in a position to pull them?
Yeah. Yeah, I would. To be honest, I've never actually been in that situation where it was that. They usually seem to be a little bit more definite, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And to be honest, sometimes the technical test is just that final icing on the cake. But some will just literally, so you will have an issue sometimes where people just present something that's just, they really haven't thought about security at all, and you kind of think, if this person's going for, as tends to be the case, people tend to sort of perceive themselves to be more senior in a much quicker space of time than I certainly believe that seniority has been earned, and you can see these things quite quickly with things like an example. Piece of coding, and I think so security is often usually the area that people will fall down on.
I think this is where sometimes take-at-home tech tests can provide or present problems, that someone can come in. You could have someone who is an expert in a certain space, and they absolutely smash that test out the park in that certain space, but you've not been able to understand the breadth of their knowledge. And if someone is evaluating themselves as a senior in the consultancy world in particular, you need to have a strong understanding of a wide variety of different disciplines. And if someone's come in and they're just, for example, .NET expert, you're giving them a test to do, and they've absolutely smashed it out of the park, but you've not seen their approach to it, and you've not been able to see how their steps they take to solving that problem, it's difficult to be able to judge what that thought process and how senior that person is, and how much of an escalation point they could be within the business, because you need to be able to understand their ways of working, but also the way they communicate and look at the person next to them to be able to share that knowledge and guide that person through it. So I think this is why, for us in particular, we did take-at-home tech tests, and we got rid of them altogether. Just to do these pairing sessions, because you can get so much from it, and it is an interview. You are interviewing at the start of it. You have a bit of fun with it. People like to code. People like to solve problems. You're going to enjoy it. This could potentially be someone you're working with in the future, and you could be doing these problems just on a customer project or on a commercial project. So just if they treat it like that and they treat it in that sense, then that's a really good inclination of that person's going to add something great to the business, but also fit in well with the culture.
We do. We had the same thing with the take-home tasks. Obviously, you can't see how somebody. I mean, you've got GitHub submissions, so you can see how much they've changed their code in the past, however many hours. But what we do is we implement a second interview to that process. So part one is the take-home task. Part two is talking through that process and how they found it. We've actually had some people that have done that, taken home that task and really struggled with it. And they've really struggled with it, but their thought process is right, or they're logistically thinking about the problems the right way. It's just they need some further training. And we've still employed those people based on, we know that there is the right thought process is there. It's just the training that that person needs, which is something we offer.
Well, it's what you're looking to hire, isn't it? Really, I think we very similar to yourself there. We hire off a person's attributes rather than their out and out skill set. Right now, we do need people to be technically excellent in certain areas, and that's why we are hiring people in that space. But what you said there, that someone who demonstrates growth mindset from the initial stages is someone that you really want to bring on board, because you know that they might have been in X role, Y role, and they've been pigeonholed in a certain space, but you can see that they're hungry to learn outside. These are why the questions I always ask is what people do outside in their own time, what they're doing in their own certain projects. You know, what are the free technologies that they'd like to work with that they've not had the chance to commercially. Things like this, and this will demonstrate where people want to go next in their journey. And it's it's a really good thing to be able to demonstrate to people that we're here not just to hire a Java expert, for example. We're here to hire someone who loves engineering and likes to solve problems and likes to be part of a team. And that, when you get someone like that, they can learn. People can learn. That mindset's difficult to learn.
Totally agree. I mean, I find. I mean, I do like your idea of the pair programming on a sort of on a webinar kind of thing. That's something that we haven't actually looked at ourselves. But yeah, my only concern on that side would be the personalities that some programmers have, which are quite quiet and introverted and sort of. I mean, I know in a real work term they'll have to work with someone, but it's a little harder when you're actually over a video conference to actually get that human to human connection.
We've actually had people pull out of the process, or start to pull out of the process because they didn't like the idea of someone watching them code, which I completely understand. And it maybe it just needs a little bit of convincing, because there's no way in the real job that anyone's going to be standing over their shoulder watching them code. It's just for this and very simple basic task that we're asking them to implement, and it's not long, it's not a scary, although it sounds a bit scary. It's not that intimidating. It's just to see how they approach the problem. So when we do give out these tasks, it's kind of, I mean, I've worked with Josh before, and he knows that when we give these out, there's a full thing of instructions there, and we really make sure that they're prepared for that. I think that putting all that effort in is something that they want to see from the company that they could be employed by.
I think just the initial thought, isn't it? Where you get given all of this information and the thought of being in a conversation with four or five people you've never met before, and who might be critically, you'd think in your head, potentially critically going in at your code, but when really, like you said, there are 4 or 5 people there who are just there to help and answer some questions if you do get stuck.
Yeah, and they do offer that. We like to give them feedback because we want to see how they respond to that feedback. So even if they've done it, and I mean, like I said, these tests that we offer, so they might be like FizzBuzz or Palindrome or Sum, so they're really simple, but they might smash them out because they've seen the answers online. So then in that scenario, we'll ask them to do a different iteration, and if they find it really easy, we ask them to use different terminology within their like functionality within their test, just to see their level of capability. But we're not judging them. We're helping them and leading them through the process instead of just fend for yourself.
It'd be a red flag for me, I reckon, if someone wasn't comfortable with watching someone else watching them code.
Yeah, pressure's healthy, isn't it?
We work in a creative industry, and often the way a lot of businesses are moving forward now is pair programming, not in interviews, on day-to-day working. That's how we're growing. That's how we're evolving our skill set. And I think if someone was unsure about someone watching them code, I think that's a barrier that I'd try and help that individual break down, because it's only going to better them their next steps in their career, because that's the way their industry's going. The industry's going that way. As a consultancy, and we have to get we're often in high pressured conversations and environments with customers who are wanting to see what we've done this week and show and tells and wanting to demonstrate things that we've done on a regular basis. So for me, if someone was uncomfortable at that stage to be watched doing coding or doing some pairing, that'd definitely be a red flag for me.
I'd be having a conversation with them to explore what the problem is, I think.
Yeah. And something that could perhaps, that if they are nervous, that's something that we as people on the journey with them could help them with and help break down those barriers, like I said, and give them a safe space to say, look, this is, really just work with us on this, bounce ideas off each other. It's not us analysing every single button you press on the keyboard. It's to hear your thought process. And sometimes we've had people go through our pair programming session, and it's quite, I'd say not very rare, but rarely sometimes people get into the situation where they've not actually started to put down much code at all. But what they have done is discuss the process that they're going to take and the approach they're going to take in a really high level of detail. And the conversation's taken the focus away from actually doing the work and solving the solution. And the conversation is that good and that strong that it's developed into a whole heap of different questions that have come around on top of the pair program that we originally intended to do. And that's highlighted that person's mindset of that approach. And that can be, I suppose, the most important part, really, rather than the actual code they're putting down.
I absolutely agree. We offer there's 3 different tasks in our tests, and obviously we've only got an hour, so we don't have time to go through them all. So we might do a really easy basic task and then ask them to talk through the next one, just talk through their approach. They don't actually have to code it; they just have to talk through it. And then if they feel like they could do it, maybe they could quickly bash it out. If not, they've talked through it. We understand their approach, and that's good enough.
Cool. Yeah, good. Yeah, agree with that.
No, I like that a lot. So I guess, Paul, this one's for you. When you are hiring an individual, like not based on the tech test, I mean, what is it that you're really looking for in terms of personality traits and perhaps particular background, say, if you were to hire into the team now? I'm just interested to understand, when not using the tech test as an option, what it is that you're looking for when you're not necessarily technically grilling them, should we say?
So I think from my perspective, you've got somebody who's going to be kind of outgoing and creative, somebody you can have a conversation with about how they go about solving a problem, because whether they're programming or doing any other role within the tech world, we're pretty much paid to solve problems. And you want somebody to be able to articulate how they actually go about solving a problem. You want somebody who's open to getting feedback, and you want somebody who is, clearly going to work within a team, especially if you're in a consultancy. There's very few roles within a consultancy where you're going to work in isolation. So they've got to be comfortable working both as part of your team and as part of a client's team. So yeah, you just have conversations around, what's their personality. Some of that is even what do they do outside work. It gives you a feel for what they're like. Maybe a little bit unfair, but if somebody's favourite pastime is going and sitting in the library reading books, chances are they're not. They're a bit of a loner and they might not enjoy doing too much in the way of teamwork.
Yeah, that's interesting. And this one goes out to all of you. But what have you noticed in terms of difficulties hiring during COVID, or since the more remote working aspect has started coming? What have you found the difficulties being?
I'll know this one for you. I suppose I can look at this from 2 angles. One is the speed at which candidates are disappearing. I know in my last company, when we were looking at hiring people, if you didn't get to people really quickly, they'd gone off the market. And then, having recently changed jobs, looking at it from the other angle, it's actually getting used to doing remote interviews. And that, I think, applies to both sides of the fence. I know for my interview, with Anne, one of the challenges there was both the guy who interviewed me and myself are both big fans of working on a whiteboard. And we didn't actually have a solution when we both realized it. We were like, how are we going to do this? So I think as a company, that's kind of something you might need to think about. If you want to use a whiteboard, how can we do that in a virtual world? But equally, it was something that just hadn't entered my head that I was going to get into a conversation in an interview and suddenly go, right, where's the whiteboard? And it was like, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. So it's that kind of using technology to solve problems that don't exist when you sat face to face in a meeting room.
Did you not use one of the virtual whiteboards?
Yeah, the challenge was neither of us thought of it initially, so we just didn't have it set up. So there was that kind of 5-minute moment of, oh, how are we going to do this?
Problem solving. There you go.
Yeah.
Another hurdle to jump over. No, but the virtual whiteboards have been integral for us 100%. Like that whiteboarding element of the internet, which you mentioned, really. The pair programming session for us is an hour, and then the tech Q&A and whiteboarding session, as we call it, is 90 minutes. And that whiteboarding session is really where we get to explore lots of different elements and put lots of different stuff down on the board, talking about architectures or systems we've worked on, problems, things that could have been better, things that they would have changed, things that if they could go back, they'd like to do again, and things they'd like to implement with new technologies and things like this. And there's lots of different elements of that whiteboarding session that are really important. Understanding not just obviously person's experiences on those problems or on those architectures, but also someone's ability to be able to demonstrate and take people along the sort of timeline from where things went and how things worked. And I think that's a really important part for us as consultants. And you probably agree with me here, Paul, because, you know, there's a lot of times when you're doing this with customers. So the whiteboarding session is 100%. It has to be in our interview, whether it was physical or virtual. It's always been there for us.
Yeah, I think the challenge for mine was they'd got a scenario where they didn't expect me to say, well, if we're in a meeting room, I'd be using a whiteboard.
Yeah.
I don't think we haven't found that many problems hiring during COVID. The only issue that I see quite often is it's kind of thrown salaries off a little bit. We can obviously now hire remote, and the salaries in the south might be different to those in the northeast where we are based. Mainly our platform team are based. And because all these people can work remotely, it just has skewed the salaries a little bit. And that's, I mean, we've just been through quite a successful round of hiring. And I think we hired about 4 people, and we had a lot of applicants and a lot of people complete the tech test. And if anything, it gave us a little bit too much choice, to be honest. But yeah, salaries is the only issue.
I'd agree with Erin there. I think it's been I think it's businesses. If we are hiring as businesses, and all of us here can say that, you know, that's the way we've been doing them. I think we're in a lucky and privileged place in the current sort of climate. But it's also been good to be able to provide people with a good place to come and work. And there's been lots of opportunities for people to move. There's lots of the world got kicked up the backside to digitally transform overnight, and that the tech industry had a big torch shone on it straight away, because we were the people leading that sort of leading the way forward. So in this industry, I feel, it became, if anything, I think it got mentioned before, it became faster and more competitive than it was beforehand. Lots of people, the big businesses trying to snap up lots of people quickly. Including ourselves.
It's those companies that adapt, and that's what developers especially want to see, because that is imperative to. Obviously, this pandemic was unforeseen, and people have lost their jobs, and it has been awful. But the tech companies that have adapted and grown are still growing, and will still continue to grow, and will still hire.
We work in the world of continual development, don't we? So that's, you know, the industry's continuing developing itself. So that's, if you can demonstrate that as a business, then you'll appeal to the people out there to be able to join. And
they will definitely do your tech tests.
They'll definitely do the tech tests.
That's for sure. And Mark, you've been kind of through both sides, like Paul, where you've been, I guess, looking yourself, and
Yeah,
through?
I haven't actually. I'll be honest. I haven't. Well, obviously, since the start of the pandemic, unfortunately, the previous company I worked with was very heavily affected by the pandemic. It was in event management, and obviously, no events. So our software was kind of like not really very much use at that particular time. So yeah, I actually moved jobs. Unfortunately, we had some redundancies, so I was one of them, and fortunately managed to get a job pretty quickly. But yeah, so I went through obviously the interview processes from the other side, and to be honest, I found it all right. The only thing I would feel is the bit that you're missing out on is a bit more on that human relationship thing. I think meeting people face to face, I still believe has better connections than over a web camera. It's even people's the way they hold themselves in an interview. You know, the way you can read so much on body language that I think you miss out on a webcam. But you know, these are things. I think the world has adapted. I mean, I think the world has adapted pretty well, actually, considering, but certainly the tech world. It was almost like it was just a switch over. Okay, we're working from home now. Let's do it. Wow. And obviously meetings have been the biggest challenge, because meetings have increased incredibly because of the need to communicate. Whereas you just go over and have a word with somebody now has to be trying to arrange some time for a meeting. But other than that,
it's funny that you say that, because actually one of the biggest bugbears that I had whilst working in recruitment was getting developers to interviews. That was the biggest problem that I had. And now they have very little excuse. They're at home, they're in front of their computer anyway. And the virtual interview process has worked better for those people. As far as that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you are actually there all the time anyway. So.
Question to Mark and Paul: how was it accepting the job without meeting the people physically?
Interesting. I mean, the thing is, you still do your research about the company anyway, don't you? You look into what the company's doing, and a lot of the reason you're actually moving to a company is because of the company and what they're doing. So I think to that bit, it's not too bad, and I think I've without banging my own drum here, I tend to go on with most people. It's very rare I've come across somebody I really haven't liked working with. So not too bad. Obviously, as I say, you don't get that face to face. You don't get to visit the office, all that sort of thing. I still haven't visited the office yet. Hopefully, we'll do the new year. But
Yeah, I'm kind of keen to get into our office as well, because it's supposed to be quite nice. It's a couple of my team have been in and said it's really good, but yeah, I've not had a chance to go in. But in terms of joining, I knew Anne reasonably well by reputation, and I've got a former colleague who works here, so I had the opportunity to actually have a conversation with somebody who was already in the organisation. But also I've got people who got friends who work at other companies who have come across Anne quite a bit, so the reputation was really strong for me. And the other thing that I was really keen on is the fact that Anne is such a people-focused organisation, and there were a couple of conversations during the interview that made that really obvious. You always make a little bit of leap of faith, I suppose, when you've only ever met somebody on a video call, but I think I had a little bit more confidence of that, A, because of the reputation, and B, I suppose I've done more than my fair share of remote work, working with guys in America and managing teams in India. So I guess I've got reasonably good at making a judgment on people on video calls.
Which comes down to the brand awareness and the marketing behind the business, isn't it? Letting people have a good insight into what's going on. I actually worked with Anne under one of my clients before I joined Infinity Works. I actually got the opportunity to, or was going down the opportunity to join Anne on their talent team. They're a great business, good people. The offices in Manchester are very cool. You'll like them. I've done a few events there, so not to rub it in, but I've been there.
One day you'll see it.
No, they're a good bunch.
No, it was same for me, to be fair. I was made redundant due to the pandemic, and then after being onboarded remotely, I mean, I still haven't met my MD because in Manchester here, it's still quite a start-up field, being there are only 3 of us and 2 still on furlough. So it's like adapting to the fact that everyone in the business has met each other. They talk about all these work events that they've been on, being able to go to the pub, and I've joined in a point where none of it's possible. So I've always been, the way I've recruited, the way I've done things has been face to face. That's how I met Toby, was through meetups. I've always enjoyed that part of my job. So learning to, like, it's only the last sort of 4 weeks we've been pushed to do more Teams meetings, do more face to face stuff, just because I'm so used to just giving someone a call, mobile to mobile, and doing it while I'm wandering around and booking out these time slots to see people face to face whilst you can't. I'm finding more valuable is to see how people are reacting and see how people are feeling about the conversation, whereas on a phone call you don't know whether they're doing the washing up, cooking dinner, they could be doing anything that's interrupting that, whereas if it's booked into a time slot, you know that hopefully they're not doing anything else.
Yeah.
That's cool. So I guess one of the last things that I wanted to give to help people who hopefully will watch this is like advice for people juggling multiple processes at the moment. It's like, because we're losing people to any number of things, either tech tests or whether it be the feedback taking too long, or they're just not really sold on the business, which is an obvious reason. But just to understand some advice to give to developers and other people who are looking at what might be best to do really when juggling multiple.
So I asked the guys that we have recently hired for their advice, because I felt that was the best way to answer this question. And I had a few different answers. The way that they prioritized their tests when they were looking for roles is the most fun and simplest, and then the rest. Now, when I spoke to one of the more senior members of the team that we've just hired, he said that it was completely based on company reputation. They're the tests that he prioritized, and they're the ones he did first and put the most effort into. Those that are giving him the most feedback or had been exciting in their first interviews. And I think that's why we do the live coding test quite early on, because we've already got a little bit of their personality. We can see a little bit about them. Then they do the test, and then they go away and do the take-home test when they're kind of invested and excited by the role. So,
yeah. On that one, I think it is about picking the one that you really, really want to do. What's the job you really like? That's why our test was the last part of it, and it was as you say, you've already got some investment because you've already met the people, you've already seen if you're going to get on well with them and all that sort of thing. And so in those circumstances, is which is the job that you want most, and put the effort in on that one. I mean, you may not get it, but I think you should be going for where you feel you'll be most happy.
Yeah, I suppose two bits of advice for either party, really. People looking for jobs or people looking to hire. From my side, I think people looking for jobs, with what Erin and Mark have just said there, look for the business that gets your sort of belly tingling the most. You'll have a business that appeals to you the most, but don't rule out the others until you've experienced it, until you're at the point where you think like, no, that's not the right place for me. And I think it's all about understanding that business and doing your due diligence. I think looking on a website's great, but go and look at the socials, go and look at what they're doing in the community, go and look at what they're doing in the industry, other than just their website. Like, what are they actually doing? What are their values? What's the business doing to promote growth within themselves? So the people who join, what's your journey going to be when you get on board? And from the hiring side of things, I think we've discussed it a few times. It's that initial conversations. Those first conversations are really important. Those first conversations are really important. Don't hammer down a strict set questions. That the first conversations for the person you're speaking to explore the business. So you want to give them all the doors to open that's right for them. So give them a really good picture of what it will be, to showcase the challenges, talk about the hard stuff, talk about the things they're going to come up against. Don't just glamorize it as this is this amazing place to work. it's tough. It can be tough there, but you'll be really rewarded by it, and you'll really enjoy it and be fulfilled and excited and challenged when you come into work. Those initial conversations are super important, and they will be the things that make you be the person that gets the tech test done first. If you've had that good conversation, you've showcased the business, where you're going, where that person can go within your business, then they'll more than likely do your interview or put your interview to the top.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think from my perspective, if you from a candidate, I think the important things are absolutely prioritize the jobs you're going after, and put effort into understanding the organization so you can make an informed decision about why company A versus company B. From a tech test, it makes sense to get their tech tests done first, but also just so that you've got some ideas. If you come down to making a decision between two companies, you're not doing it, say, purely on salary. You've actually got an understanding of why you want company A versus company B. From an interview perspective, I think the really important thing is be honest both with yourself and with the company. Don't try and mold yourself to the role because you think it's the role you want, because that'll just work out badly for both parties.
Yeah.
And then I guess from the recruiter's perspective, give people feedback. I went for quite a few jobs, and I actually did some numbers afterwards, and it was something like 80% of the jobs that I applied for, I didn't get any feedback on. And that is just appalling. It is a shocking state of affairs.
It's horrendous. That's so bad.
I absolutely totally agree with it. I mean, as I say, being in the same position, the one thing you really need, because the one thing you've applied for a job, you don't know whether to write it off your list or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I like to think sort of, I think from recruitment agents particularly, often, particularly for managerial roles, that person will be the person who's doing the recruitment going forward.
That's exactly the follow-up comment I was going to make is, I've now got a fairly long list of recruitment companies that are never going to get any business, and I'm in a management role, and as Josh knows, where I can go out to the market to recruiters, and I've got a list of companies that I'm never going to go near.
Yeah.
I think
I agree.
Really important what you said there. I think feedback's what separates a good recruiter. Rest. It really does. And some people can look at it, and if anyone's sort of watching this backwards and not backwards, in reverse. Anyone watching this back as a recruiter, sometimes you can look at it thinking that's going to be a difficult call. A difficult call can mean so much to the person on the end of the phone, much that constructive feedback. And it's not, you've not made that evaluation as a recruiter. The business has made that evaluation. It's only your job to pass on that feedback to the person, not to withhold it or just cut off ties at that point. Really good point there. I think another thing that I wanted to say as well, I suppose, for what going on what Paul said there, is when people have 7, 8, 9 jobs on the go, that's not healthy. It's not healthy to balance that many jobs on the go at the same time. Hone in on the ones that you want to focus on, because you will get confused. Interviewing at 8 or 9 different places will be hard work, and you will not be your best self in the ones that you really want to go for, because you're thinking about the one in an hour, or you're thinking about the one tomorrow, or you're thinking about the one yesterday. Focus on the ones and then move on. If you don't get them, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move on to the next one. I think that's definitely good bit of advice there, Paul, on that one.
On the feedback thing, I was going to say on the feedback thing, I would also say that, it's very important from a company perspective as well that you feedback, even if it's to someone you're not going to hire, because, programming fraternity isn't that big. And, I think if you're fair to the people, even the ones you don't employ, then, you get good credence as a company.
That's one of the first things I learned in recruitment, about employer brand and how important that is, whether you're working for another company or whether you're working internally. Given that feedback is imperative, and it's a non-negotiable thing for me.
No, it's the most important thing for me as well. Like when it comes to understanding, because it's not just, it's about the person, like, so they can take something. If they don't get a role, I still want to place them elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean because they don't get a job with And or they don't get a job with InfiniWorks, that doesn't mean that's the end of my particular journey with them. If I don't pass on some feedback, I'd want to be in the same position where I'm learning so I can develop to go move forward. So the fact that those numbers of 80% like, has shocked me. I mean, I was looking myself, and I mean, every recruiter job that I applied for or was speaking with, I was quite involved in the process. But for other positions with businesses like where you're working internally, which I was looking at, when you're not speaking to an individual directly, you do get kind of stuck amongst a big group of people. So I guess my advice on that is to go and reach out to people within the business. Don't just let yourself be a number on the apply, like stand out. Like that's a big thing for me, is what if only 2 people out of 70 are speaking to one to message the recruiter or message the tech director or whatever to let them know that you're interested and you're keen. You're immediately above everybody else who's in there, and I think that is standing out is absolutely key.
Yeah, I think
amazing.
I think on the I think on the feedback thing as well, you know, candidates shouldn't be scared of following up, trying to get feedback. You know, I'm not saying you do it every 5 minutes for a week, but you know, try 2 or 3 times, and if you're not getting feedback after the 3rd time, that's probably telling you all you need to know.
Yeah.
I also think working with the right recruiter is like imperative to this process. I mean, having been on both sides of it, I've worked in agency and now internally, but having someone that's got your back and helping you through the process, like it is stressful and it's hard, but having a connection with that recruiter that is going to help and advise you to get these jobs, especially if, and I'm stereotyping here, but developers aren't that kind of extrovert, able to sell themselves really actively in an interview, especially if they're struggling with the video call situation or whatever it might be. But if so I've been hiring with Josh recently, and I'll ring him and ask him how the candidate feels about the role and have that kind of understanding as well, because that's the connection, and that I think that is really important.
Yeah.
No, there's been some really valuable points taken away, but I am conscious of time because I know we've got other things to do. So I appreciate all of you getting involved in it. This is the first of like what I hope to be a few, and like just off the back of this conversation, I've had a few ideas specifically around culture, because I think that seems to be like one of the most important things for like businesses selling themselves to engage these people to actually do it, which can make my job difficult, because if they're not selling themselves well, then that means that therefore the candidate's not engaged, and then we're losing out, and that's a lose-lose for everyone's situation. So thank you again, and yeah, I'll drop you all a message separately afterwards, and the recording, I'll get some snippets out of it, and I'll release the full recording within the next week or so.
Preferably before Christmas and these become dated.
Yeah, I've only got 4 days left, so I'll make sure I do it before then.